New Vixer paper up. Spinning stars in life and stellar metamorphosis. I love talking about life. I love life. To understand how complex a human body is to understand a miniature cosmos. We have trillions of cells, and inside those cells there are hundreds of quadrillions of atoms moving around in organized fashion, like a factory upon factories upon factories. Our bodies are so freakishly complex, and we don't even comprehend it, how complex our bodies are. And to reach that sort of complexity, we sort of have to understand how much energy it would take and how much time it would take to reach that level of complexity. And that's something I think the astronomers, they don't get it. They don't understand anything. They don't understand how complex our bodies are and how incredibly time-consuming it is for an organism to evolve into us, and how much chemistry is involved on scales that are completely unfathomable. They can't imagine the scales of time required to form life. They say they do, but writing down a number isn't imagining it, isn't comprehending it. I drive a forklift around at work. It only weighs around 6,300 pounds. What is that in European kilograms? What's that? 3, like around 3,000 kilos, 2,900, 3,000 kilos. And if I'm to drive this forklift around and the back tire is going to go into some sugar sand, which is really weak sand, I'm going to need another truck to pull it out. Because granted, it's only fallen into the sand about maybe like an inch or two. That forklift weighs so much that I'm not going to be able to lift it up out of that sand. And it's a common sense kind of thing. It's kind of an intuitive thing for people that just simply drive forklifts. But an astronomer, they don't understand things like mass in the way they claim to. To really genuinely comprehend mass, they would be forklift drivers right off the bat and know they shouldn't be driving into sugar sand. But I guarantee you take an astronomer and you stick them in a forklift and you have them drive around and make sure they don't run the forklift tires into the sand, they would be completely clueless. They wouldn't know any better. Because they don't understand mass. They don't understand how much energy it takes to move things that are heavy. Extremely heavy. And we're just talking a few thousand kilograms in a forklift. That being said, when stars evolve, when they cool and collapse, to make something the size of the Earth spin takes the mass and energy of an entire star. Okay? The Earth is spinning on its axis every 24 hours. That's an enormous amount of axial angular momentum. That's way more than a bowling ball spinning on your finger. Way more than basketball. Way more than bowling ball. If you had literally what they call a neutron star spinning on your finger like a basketball, it still wouldn't be enough angular momentum that the Earth has. As much axial angular momentum as the Earth has. And it's important to understand that, because I've been searching through the history of it. I've been looking at old documents, a lot of translated Soviet era documents, believe it or not. I've been reading through a lot of those. I don't talk about that a lot, but I've been using Google Translate to translate all the old Soviet documents, looking for people who stated the same things that Alexander Oparin did concerning this theory. But I've been doing that a lot, I'll admit. And I'm trying to find if any of those old Soviet astronomers, I know a lot of the Americans haven't, but why it is that the Earth spins. And none of them have figured it out. None of them. They just all assume that the planets are separate from stars. They assume the Earth is something other than a star. But if they would just connect the Earth, which is down here, to a very young Earth, which is called a star by the astronomers, it would click, pow, just like that. In this paper, Spinning Stars in Life and Stellar Metamorphosis, The abstract goes, it is hypothesized that all stars need to spin with significant axial angular momentum to create life, which means to begin the process of evolution from simple compounds and native elements. A star that does not have significant axial angular momentum cannot create it. A few reasons are provided. And you can read along with me. I'll link this to the bottom. It's already on Vixra. Number 1. The Earth has a significant amount of axial angular momentum and is the only object that is observed to date to host it. If Earth had less axial angular momentum than Venus, Mars, or Mercury and also hosted life, then this would be wrong. So basically what I'm saying with that is that if Mars or Venus or Mercury had life and they spin with a lot less axial angular momentum than Earth, then this hypothesis would be wrong, which is a branch from the general theory. Number 2, Earth had far more axial angular momentum than it does now because it was a younger, hotter star, and all younger, hotter stars have more axial angular momentum. So life creation in the simplest forms occurred much earlier. Life creation, the beginnings of life, happened inside of a star when it was very, very, very young. The beginnings of molecular combinations, the beginnings of when hydrogen first started combining with the carbon, which first started combining with the oxygen, which first started combining with nitrogen, and what have you. That all happened earlier, vastly earlier in the Earth's history, when it was a much hotter, younger star. Of course, you're not going to see that in any astrophysics books. To them, a star creating life in of itself, that's just that their worldview is completely outdated, and you can go ahead and bury it. It doesn't make any. Their worldview is like life came here. What? Panspermia? No, life was formed exactly where it's found. It's redundant to say life came here from outer space when Earth already is in outer space. These astronomers, I don't know if they understand what logic is. Number 3, a spinning object allows for the atmosphere to exchange air globally. So when it spins, of course, there's a bit of lag with the air. Of course, an object in motion stays in motion, but as well, there are also different levels of spin inside the interior of the star as it evolves. Some material has more inertia than other material as it's layered. So of course those layers are going to be different as it spins. And when they exchange orbits, this is the really cool part. When they exchange orbits with other hotter hosts, and the gravitational field of a much larger object is making that smaller object orbit around it, those moments of inertia inside those objects are going to make the object wobble and spin, which means what's going to happen is the magnetic field of that object is going to be off kilter by huge amounts, or even the axis of the polar magnetic field is going to be off. That's why Neptune and Uranus, they spin all haphazardly and their junk is all off. It's because they were adopted by the sun. They're still off. They need to reorient themselves, as did Earth, as did Jupiter, as did Saturn. They're the most recent adoptions that the sun has. Number 4, heat is essential to creating life, as all life has lots of molecular motion. That's easy. And the heat transfers over the surface. I'm not gonna read the whole thing out. More molecular motion means more opportunity for molecules to become more complex as they evolve or combine. More molecular motion, more opportunity to become more complex. That's basically what it amounts to. If you have an object that's spinning, it's going to make things move more. It's pretty much common sense. Number 6, an object that becomes tidally locked, meaning its pre-tidal locking axial angular momentum is mostly removed, will lose the opportunity to create life if it does not already host it. And the way I view this is, say you take Earth as life on it. It gets adopted by a hotter host, or it scoots in closer to the sun. And the gravitational field of the sun causes the Earth to kind of slow down, which means it will start baking the sides of the Earth as it moves around the sun, a lot longer, for longer periods of time, which means those cycles that the Earth experiences of night and day, if those are gone, throws everything off. The vegetation is going to be thrown off. The sea and animal life is going to be thrown off. Our own mental cycles are going to be thrown off. And eventually, once it moves to where this Earth is only orbiting around the sun once every 200 something days, it's just going to cook everything on the surface, and no life is going to be able to live on it. It's going to be inhospitable. So tidal locking is a death knell for objects. If we find Earth-like objects that are in the tidal or in the habitable zone of a host star, and we find out that they're tidally locked, all bets are off for finding life on that star. It's over. It's already been cooked off the surface. Number 7, if the star already hosts life, then tidal locking will end it. I already said that. And the star will get sterilized. I already said that. 8, an environment that provides oscillation is preferable to one that does not, with reference to forming a vast array of different chemicals. It gives the chemistry occurring inside the star and on its surface lots of changing conditions. And this is very important. Static environments are deadly. Environments that do not have heat, cool cycles, rain, dry cycles, tide cycles, day-night cycles, do not give any impetus for changing and adaptation, which is the basis for evolution. Constant change and adaptation to environment. That's a very essential part of the process of evolution in life. You need to have change in order to evolve. If there's no change, there's no impetus for evolution. Things stay the same. Think of crocodiles. Those things are old as shit, and they've been around for a very, very long time. Their environment hasn't changed much. But if you want things to change more rapidly, you make the star spin rapidly. And it's basically that in a nutshell. 9. Environmental to change and adapt is most effective on an object that is spinning rather than mostly static like Venus, which had life in the past. But Venus is dead now. It's at least 100 times, if not 200 times older than the Earth. That's a dead star. There's no life on there. We can just forget about it. It's not going to amount to much in terms of research. Just study the Earth a little bit and take some pictures of Venus, but we're not going to learn too much from Venus. Not too much than we already know about it. It's a dead star. 10. The objects that have the most axial angular momentum tend to be the youngest, while the oldest and dead stars and stellar guts have the least. And I provide the new gyrochronology that's also in there. And I'll skip the NASA part because NASA is sort of, they're conformist. They don't have any room for new ideas. And if there's a new idea, they have to let it cook and simmer in their minds long before it has actual, revolutionary power. In other words, this is a big change, let's change it now. NASA isn't like that. They're very conformist. This is the idea, this is what's worked, we're going to go with this for the next 100 years. That's just how they think. That's how they are. They're very conformist. And most importantly, I've dedicated this paper to my grandfather, William Joseph Walensky. He was a gantry crane operator in Baltimore at a Baltimore shipyard long before I was born. He passed away before I got to meet him. He helped to build ships, which is fitting. I would love to have done the same. I like large machines. And the fact that my grandfather worked in a large shipyard where he operated a gantry crane lifting up large ship parts and building ships that must have been really cool. I wish I would have been able to see that. Alright guys, I guess that sums up this little talk. I'm being a little more candid right now. Again, for those who are new, there's the graph. And last but not least, hi Celeste.